Good evening. I'm George Preston, General Manager of Classical WFMT in Chicago. And thank you for joining us for this very special live chat hosted by Ravinia prior to the premiere of Leonard Bernstein's Mass, filmed at the Ravinia Festival last summer on PBS Great Performances, tonight at 9 p.m. Central on WTTW in Chicago, pbs.org/GPERF, or the PBS video app. Please check your local listings. With me this evening are Marin Alsop, Ravinia Chief Conductor and Curator, appointed in February 2020, Paulo Szot, star baritone and our celebrant in this performance of Mass, Josephine Lee, Chicago Children's Choir and Vocality Artistic Director, Joshua Chodoroff, Band Director at Highland Park High School, and of course, Welz Kauffman, Ravinia President and CEO, who made this all possible. Thank you all panelists for being here this evening. It's wonderful to see you.
Great to be here.
Now, if you at home have questions for our panel tonight, whether you're watching this on the Ravinia Facebook page or any of our broadcast partners, including the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, WTTW, WFMT, Great Performances, PBS, or from the official Leonard Bernstein or Marin Alsop pages, simply put your question into the comments below and we will answer as many as we can towards the end of tonight's event. Welz, we must start with you. Set the situation up for us. Can you talk about your dream of a Bernstein centennial celebration, how Marin was integral to the plan, and why Mass absolutely had to be a centerpiece for the programming?
Happy to. Everybody in the world who worked for an orchestra or an opera company or any musical organization was going to celebrate Leonard Bernstein's 100th birthday in 2018, as he was the guy, the master, the genius in so many very ways. So when we were working on planning it for Ravinia, a couple of things came to mind to do. But Mass in particular was important to me because I actually accompanied a musical theater class when I was a piano student at Tanglewood back in 1977, and it was all Leonard Bernstein music. And it was Lenny doing the coaching. And the first thing I played was Simple Song as a pianist for a singer. Then my first job in LA was for the Olympic Arts. I worked for Gordon Davidson. Gordon Davidson turned out to be the first director of Mass at the Kennedy Center in the early 70s. Having Marin be our curator for our celebration was also a natural fit. She and I had known each other for years. And I've been lucky to be able to bring her to the festival a couple of times early on in my time at Ravinia, and she had a huge success with our audiences and loved the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, who wouldn't? And this was a piece that had never been done professionally in Chicago before, much to my surprise. And it seemed all the more reason with the right people, if one could assemble the right people to make it happen and the resources to make it happen, because it's a pretty penny to make it work. That it would be a great centerpiece for any Bernstein celebration, but especially the one at Ravinia. So the first person that all had to begin with was Marin, no question.
Right. And Mass was a centerpiece of your programming for the Bernstein Centennial Celebration, and you have to have a centerpiece in the Celebrant for Mass. So can you and Marin both comment on your process for choosing Paulo for the Celebrant?
So I'm going to jump in. This is because I'm in Denver, having dinner with Marin, offering her the opportunity to be our leader, curator, co-programmer with me of this celebration. She said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Mass." She said, "That'd be great. Who do you want to have be the celebrant?" And almost at the same time, we said, "How about Paulo Szot?"
So it was painstaking, right?
In South Pacific in New York. I thought, this is the guy that has it all: actor, singer, someone who connects to an audience in such a real way, kind of phenomenal that he didn't kind of grow out of the stable of singers that Bernstein himself had worked with.
Yeah.
He just seemed perfect in so many different ways. So that's my recollection. Maybe it's a romantic one, Marin. Maybe you have a different one than that, but that's what I remember.
No, it was really almost simultaneously. We had the same thought about Paulo, and I said, well, let me let me give him a call, and let me send him an email and ask him to have a look at the score. And so that, remember that, Paulo? That
Absolutely, yes. And I still have that email I looked at last week just to confirm that that really happened.
I know, really.
Because it was I had no idea of the piece before that. And when you wrote that email to me, and I understood the way of the character, I was so honored and so happy, and I just couldn't believe that could be something that would happen in a year from that moment.
Yeah.
Well, you, Paulo, had a great backup band, so to speak. You had the Chicago Symphony Orchestra on the stage and lots of other musicians. Marin, can you describe the reaction of the CSO musicians to their first and second experiences performing Mass, and the audience response? Because it was done last summer and the summer before, right?
Yes, I think particularly the first time we did the piece, the musicians, they just fell in love with the piece, and they were so happy to play a huge work that they'd never done before like this. And with, I think, the messages of the piece, the philosophy of the piece, so engaged everyone, besides the incredible musicality of the piece. And there's something for everybody to do, even the saxophones who have to sit there for half the show and not do too much. But everything's meaningful, and it's the sum of the parts. So for me, it was a great joy to bring something new to the CSO and have them embrace it. And when Welz said, well, we're going to do it again so that we can film it and really perfect it, the musicians were absolutely thrilled. And I think all of us were.
Not every conductor would have the range and the chops to do this piece. What are the big challenges for you?
Well, I think, I mean, there's the obvious challenge of trying to control all of the logistics. There's so many things going on, and Josh and his band, and Josephine and all of her forces, and so there's that aspect to it. But I would say the biggest challenge is to try. It's the same as in any piece, is to try to capture the message of the piece and give it an architecture and a narrative that works, especially with such eclectic musical genres all interwoven. But I have to say, we had a very, very special combination in the cast, in Paulo, in the choirs, in the band. Everyone that was involved was 100% committed.
Yeah. I want to remind folks who are viewing this that you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. Just put them in the comments below, whatever platform you're watching on, and we'll try and get to them towards the end of this event. Now, Paulo, you're a Tony Award-winning Broadway performer. You've performed to great success and acclaim at the Metropolitan Opera and many other opera companies. You've done the whole range of classical singing. Can you talk about your approach to this unique role and this particularly challenging piece?
Yeah, I like a description. I'm a bunch of different styles, both as an artist and as a person. And, Mass has it all, classical rock and Broadway style songs, chants, dance. It has everything that I love. So of course, I identified with it immediately with the material. And the first moment that I got the score, I started to make my research and find recordings of Mass, and I concentrated, of course, on listening the original Celebrant, the wonderful Alan Titus, and his recording in a way has guided me and helped me so much to understand the path, the nuances, the feelings of this journey as the Celebrant is exposed to. Musically, the approach was the same that I would approach any very difficult music to learn, because it is complicated music to learn. And I remember the last time was that when I learned Shostakovich the Nose. So with Mass, this was the same amount of time and the same difficulties. Very complicated music that sounds wonderful at the end and sounds easy, but it's hard to learn. And vocally, it's a blessing, I guess, for every singer that has the luck to play the Celebrant, because Bernstein gives you the opportunity to play with your voice and with the vocality, different kinds of vocality. He sings the whole thing in falsetto, like in Our Father, and then in a certain rage all of a sudden. And so, and the extension of the ranges, it's incredible. He goes from a very low bass E up to a massive, solid, and very present A natural. So it's 2.5 octaves. So it's a very extensive range of vocals. Dramatically, I had to go deep, inside of myself to find the humanity of the Celebrant, and I think that was, in a way, the key, to find this man and to play him as sincere as I could.
Right, because it's not like doing any other mass where you're singing the notes on the page. As a concert singer, he is a real character.
Yeah, and we don't know much about him, so I think the key was to find the humanity in a person.
Mm-hmm. Josephine Lee, when we spoke on the phone to prep for this, you told me you'd never done this piece before. You weren't familiar with the work. What was it like for you to delve into this piece for the first time?
I fell in love with it immediately. It resonated with my soul. As Marin said, it's an incredibly eclectic work with elements of rock and roll, jazz, blues, gospel, classical, rhythmically and harmonically invigorating, and overall was so powerful. And it had that impact on me and our singers. And honestly, I felt like he wrote it for us for this time. Mm-hmm. And I always looked up to Bernstein, his Young People's Concert, as a mentor, musical educator, and hero. And through the Mass, I was able to connect deeply with his soul, his emotions, and his feelings. So when he I hope what he envisioned for the Mass, his legacy, I hope he knows that it's alive and well in the lives of our children. Thanks to all of you.
And Joshua, this was such a massive collaboration. Can you talk about some of the challenges that you had in your part directing the high school band to put this together?
Sure, absolutely. First, when Welz approached me about doing it, it took about half of a second to say yes. I was just so floored and so thrilled to be a part of this. Challenge-wise, I think one of the hardest things for all of us was that there are so many moving pieces, and we were really rehearsing separate for much of the rehearsal process. The children's choirs over here, the marching bands at school working away, you've got the CSO, the street chorus, the choreography, and we had to make sure that all of our interpretations pretty much matched so that when we came together in the short amount of time, we'd have a unified performance. And I think it really speaks volumes to the depth of the artistic vision from Marin and Kevin and Leslie and Melissa. They communicated that to us so well that when we came together, we were already on the same page. And just, one thing that really embodied that for me was when we did Mass for the first time in 2018, about a week before the performance, Marin and Leslie came out to Highland Park High School to work with the band, which was thrilling beyond belief, as you can imagine. And after they introduced themselves to the students, the first thing they did is they discussed what is the role of the marching band in the larger architecture of the piece. It wasn't just let's get the notes and rhythms and phrasing. First, it's let's understand this. And I think that really spoke volumes to my students and to me about the amount of the attention to detail that really went into this, and it made our rehearsals much more efficient. And I hope that everybody really appreciated the unified performance that we gave.
They were fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah. Now, Marin, Josephine spoke a few moments ago about how she feels as though this piece was written for today. Can you talk about the initial critical and popular reception for Mass, and what effect did that have on Leonard Bernstein at the time?
Well, when Mass was premiered in, I think it was 1971, is that right, Welz? For the opening of the Kennedy Center, it was such a groundbreaking concept because it's a piece that really defies being categorized. It's not an oratorio, it's not musical theater, it's not opera, it's not symphony, but it is, yes, all of those things and more. And I think the fact that Bernstein picked the form of the Mass, of course, he was trying to immediately identify some unique characteristic of JFK in paying homage to the opening of this new center named after him. And of course, the fact that he was the only Roman Catholic president stood out for Bernstein, who was a deeply spiritual, deeply religious in many ways, and a man of great faith. And so he took the structure of the Mass to use as a framework to tell a story, basically. And of course, when one hears that and you don't know what this piece is about, you can immediately start having preconceptions about it. So there was, even before the piece was premiered, there was a lot of talk, a lot of resistance to the piece, because I think it was thought to be a little bit sacrilegious, although that's not what Bernstein's intent was. So I think for any number of reasons, because it was really pushing the envelope of form and what people were familiar with in the concert hall, and because of this, the use of the Mass, I think the critics came to it with a prejudgment, unfortunately, and the audience went crazy. They loved it, but the critical reaction wasn't anything near what Bernstein had hoped for, and I think it deeply hurt him. It was a piece that I felt he was holding close always, and didn't really want to talk about that much. And for this reason, I think I fell in love with the piece, because it was kind of like a wounded child in a way, and I just I couldn't wait to get my hands on doing this piece. And when I finished my first music directorship in Eugene, Oregon, they said, "You can do any piece you want." And I said, "Well, I don't want to scare you, but I'm going to do Bernstein's Mass." And it really hadn't been done much at all. We had to redo all the parts, everything. So I feel that it's a piece that has come on a journey of life with me. And I think it's a piece that you'll find, and all of our listeners tonight and viewers will say, "Wow, this piece feels like it was written for the time we're living in today." It's about connection, which is what we're longing for now. It's about unity. It's about leadership. It's about belief system. It's about humanity. It's about what is important in life. Is it greed? Is it anger? No. It's about humanity. And I think I can't say enough about the cast and the team and the musicians, but also the vision of Welz to say, this is a piece that needs to be preserved.
Yeah.
And George, if I could just jump in.
Couldn't agree more. Yes, please,
Everything
Welz.
Marin, totally right, of course. It's also a piece about hope.
Yeah.
And it's also, we need to remember that in 1971, composers, especially someone as exalted, famous, wealthy, celebrated as Leonard Bernstein, was writing tonal music. Tonal music was out. That was just not something that any critic could actually endorse, because the 12-toners and the atonal guys and gals were very much against all of that happening. So Simple Song, which is about as tonal and beautiful as anything he's ever written, was a big turnoff to the critics from the very beginning, because they just had a resistance to not only everything that Marin talked about, which was this amalgamation of all these different kinds of things. The tonality piece always got him in the end. And he tried to write 12-tone stuff and just gave it up completely, right? Even West Side Story, the cool ballet, has a 12-tone row in it, But in this case, that was against him, along with just the knives out for someone who was so famous, right?
Yeah.
Friends with everybody, all that stuff, and the Catholic Church part, and the Nixon part. Nixon didn't go to the performance because he was told there were secret messages about assassinating Nixon within, just crazy stuff like we can't even think of today, right? Who would think of that?
Yeah, it doesn't even feel real today.
No. It's just, so all of that, but also, you know, this amalgamation, all these different pieces that Marin and Joe and Josh and Paulo have all spoken about. That's what everybody's writing today. He was way ahead of his time. That's the cool
But
thing to write.
you
That's
know
what
what's
John
also
Adams
interesting, Wells, is that
Goalie job.
yeah, I'm glad you brought up this this issue of tonality, you know, and the beauty of melody, because tonality becomes a character in Mass. Tonality versus atonality. And atonality for Bernstein throughout his career, he would represent a crisis by using atonal music. And so we have that in Mass. We also have a reference, many references to Beethoven.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, in this year that is in, you know, remembering Beethoven as well, you know, everything's in there. And it's brought together when the Celebrant has his final cathartic breakdown, and every theme and every word and every note is woven together in that brilliant mad scene, Paulo. Isn't that the most unbelievable thing?
Absolutely, it's a tour de force, and I don't remember in my 30 years on stage doing anything like that scene, especially because it's a moment where everything stops, and we hear and we see this person in a way that we didn't expect him to be, and his world is just falling down, and it's scary. And I know it's scary for who's watching and it's scary for who's doing it. So because you don't know what's going to happen next. And I think that sensation of despair is so present and it's so intense. It's just human.
Well, Paulo, I have to ask you, we mentioned the tremendous vocal range of this piece and the emotional range. How did you prepare for this, vocally, physically, emotionally? I mean, this is not a cakewalk. You have to prepare like an athlete for something like this.
Absolutely, yes. And you know, who knows me knows that I don't pace myself at all. I give it all the time. Yeah, I know there's different approaches, different artists do different things, but I believe that the instrument, the voice, is something that you have to train as an athlete, as you said. So for me, in order to have that endurance, the endurance that I need for the shows, I need to build that little by little during the rehearsal. So I use everything that I have. I try to be as present as I can every time, you know, and I usually don't say if I don't mark during rehearsals. And I think by doing that, I'm able to explore, to see where the limits are when I do it for real all the time. And also, only when you do that full, you're able to discover different things, different layers. And that's what I do with all the rehearsals that I have. I build up the endurance for the shows.
And let me just say, Paulo, you are the singer's role model. All of us. I mean, truly, you were just in it 1000%. And just to see your artistry was an absolute privilege for our children.
Thank you, Josephine. They were so beautiful. The children were so talented, and they were so incredible.
They saw you, Paulo, giving 100% all the time, and they also, every single one of them, made an enormous contribution to the final product. I mean,
they did.
This was you know, it's so interesting to think about the piece, because just the journey of sort of putting this family together to create Mass, you know, is a lot of people, over 200 people. Just this act of going through this experience together, creating a unit, creating an organism
where everybody is important,
where everyone's important, and you discovering sort of this self-awareness, this real coming of age. Everybody's discovering together. So we are already having this incredibly cathartic experience, and then we get the experience to bring this to a wider audience, and now to a huge viewership. It's really a privilege, but I think it's exactly what Bernstein intended. You know, that it's all about connecting, and that's what Leonard Bernstein was all about, right, Welz?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And George, you were asking about audience reaction.
Oh, yeah.
I was sitting in the audience for the dress rehearsal and the performance in each of the seasons. There have been times when I've been fortunate to sit in an audience where they are completely dumbfounded and quiet and respectful and excited and frightened.
Mm-hmm.
And completely caught up in it. And that's exactly what happened in the dress rehearsal with a couple of hundred people there and the first performance with 3,500 people there. I was sitting with trustees who didn't know anything about it at all. And that's not unusual. It's rarely done, right? We've spoken about that. And the ovation was astounding, but it was the feeling. I don't know, Marin, Josephine, Josh, Paulo, you were on stage. I don't know if you were feeling that wave.
Well, I was in the audience, and it
theater.
was a gut punch. It was
Yeah.
a gut punch sitting in the audience.
Yeah.
Audience members were gasping,
Yeah.
audibly
Yeah.
emotional,
Yeah.
engaged. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about the experience now.
And the next morning, I was getting calls and texts and emails from Ravinia Festival family members, our trustees, our life trustees, our women's board, our associates board, saying, why didn't you book 2 performances so we could take television?
That was
Then
short, yeah.
Bernstein said, would you think of trying to get this tape for television? And then I called Marin, and we both said, well, there's no way we're going to be able to pull all of these various people together again. And in fact, we got almost everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When does that ever happen? A year later, to make this kind of thing happen. And it shows that family that Marin was talking about, because it is its own organism. And if there's one weak link, the whole thing falls apart. It's a house of cards.
Yeah.
It's one of those very delicate pieces, also very substantial at the same time.
And from the stage perspective, I know that everybody involved was so happy to be there to doing this rather unknown piece for most people. And maybe that's one of the reasons they wanted to do it again, because it was such a good experience to be in this.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to get to some listener and viewer questions in just a moment, and the time is flying by. But before we get to the listener questions, I have to go to Josephine and Josh, because you're musicians who work with kids. What were your kids' impressions of this piece, being on stage with these incredible musicians and singers and actors, and experiencing the humanity of Leonard Bernstein through this piece?
Yeah, I mean, it was a highlight for our singers. And in fact, we had a Zoom mass reunion last week, and all of them recalled and reflected upon their most favorite moment, Gloria Tibi, Almighty Father, Dona Nobis Pacem, every single movement was shared.
So cute.
Yeah, and I mean, they connected with the story intimately, and of course, the street singers. I mean, let's talk about what a rock star cast that was.
Incredible team of singers.
Yeah, it was an honor, really, to work with that whole, like Nevin. I didn't even mention him, Tim, and Leslie, of course. And no, for me, I just want to say it was life-changing personally, and an honor. And and you all gave a gift, not only to me, but to this entire city. And I just want to say thank you for that.
And I want to absolutely echo what Josephine just said. It was life-changing for our students, for me. I mean, I know that there are so many Highland Park High School students and families out there right now. And it was to get to work with musicians, the caliber that you're seeing here, and then also, so many others. It was just phenomenal. But then also, piggybacking on what Josephine said, the story itself, I think our kids really resonate a lot with the character that Paulo played so sincerely and honestly. To watch somebody go through that amount of self-doubt and questioning, which were a lot of our students, like we've all been there, but they're a lot of them are working through that right now. But then to see that hopeful ending where, the community rallies around that person and holds them up. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it right now.
Me too.
All the kids coming with candles and everything. It was phenomenal.
Hey, well, the show is on in less than 15 minutes on WTTW. So let's get to some listener questions here. Becky P. from Ravinia Festival asks, How many days did you rehearse at Ravinia before the show last summer? And can you describe what those days were like?
I can actually take that one because I was around for all of it. So the first time in 2018, there was 2 weeks with the Street Singers. But prior to that, our musical preparer, Leslie Stifelman, had worked with all of them on the phone and Skype and things like that to get them ready. Paulo joined, Marin joined, the choir came in, marching band came in, then moved to stage for about only 3 days that first time. The second time, I was able to be a little more luxurious in the time on stage, which was great because the cameras were going to come in as well. And we reduced ever so slightly the time prior to getting to stage because so many people had done it before. So we didn't need all of that time. So I would say roughly 3 weeks.
Wow.
It was very intense, wasn't it, Paulo? I mean, the rehearsal process with Kevin's vision, and with Kevin and Melissa.
Kevin Newberry, the director.
And it's yeah, absolutely, I agree. And it's one of those productions where everybody's aligned. Everybody knows what they want, and when they want to change, everybody agrees to what they understand each other's communication was fantastic. And when that happens, rehearsals go so well.
Here's a really interesting question from Denny R. from Ravinia Festival, asking, did Maestro Bernstein have any specific person in mind in the Celebrant character, both the inspiration for the role and who might have been most suited to perform that role? And that's a question for anyone who might know something like that. Maybe Marin.
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't actually know whether he had Alan in mind for while he was writing the piece. Do you know, Paulo? Do you know?
No.
Don't know, but I think I think in many ways the character of the Celebrant is every man. It's that character that can be any one of us. Oh, I'm reminded of the lines, right? Any one of us, any one of you.
One of us,
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it wasn't really for any specific person, but really to try to embody every person in us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think you also have to remember that everything was late, right? So he brought Stephen Schwartz on to write the libretto, I believe 4 or 5 months before the premiere. And this was standard practice for Maestro Bernstein. So who knows who was actually being thought of, but Marin's exactly right. That the type of person, I think of Peter Grimes.
Yep.
When I think of the Celebrant. And remember, Lenny did the US premiere of Peter Grimes at Tanglewood. Mm-hmm. So this other person, this everyman, but also no man, right, at the same time, was kind of Lenny with his sexuality, with his religious side of things, with his feelings of being paternal and kind of a wild guy at the same time. I want to make one comment and get back to questions. Marin was talking about how this was like this wounded child. One of the things that was so interesting to me from audience reaction was that everybody I spoke to said they went back to the Bernstein they knew, West Side Story, On the Town, Jeremiah Symphony, and through the lens of Mass, heard those pieces and thought about them differently. And I thought that was a fascinating way of having an experience with something you don't know at all that is written later than all of those, and then going back and sort of thinking, oh, I got the key. I got the Bernstein key. This is the key that unlocks the magic of all those pieces in ways that I didn't know before.
Cheryl J. from WFMT says, please thank all those who made this special evening possible, and especially my and all of our special thanks to Welz Kauffman, whose brilliant programming and outreach has reached so many and long-standing audiences. With my deepest respect and warmest wishes to Welz on his pending retirement. So sorry that this magnificent final season had to be postponed. I think we all agree on that, right, Welz?
Thanks, Mom. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. That's really lovely. But all the more reason why, as Marin was saying, isn't this the right piece for not just the time and the decade we're in, but the virus time?
Yeah.
when we're all isolated. This is a piece about isolation where everybody comes together. I mean, Paulo in this piece has to start as the lead character in Oklahoma and end like Gypsy in Rose's Turn, right?
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah,
like,
it's a journey. It's a
the
journey.
spectrum of musical theater.
And the issues, I think, are so
The letters.
relevant for today. I mean, the issues of introspection that we've all been experiencing, being home suddenly and having the world stop, and what kind of citizens of the world do we want to be, and what kind of things can we believe in fundamentally. I mean, I think all of those things are questions that we're all asking ourselves.
Can you just very quickly set the stage the night of the performance that was filmed last year? What was it like? You don't have always control over the atmosphere. It was a hot night, as I recall.
No,
The performance night was beautiful.
the performance night, what happened was the dress rehearsal night was the hottest night in the history of the world. And not only Paulo, I looked over at Paulo at one point. I've never seen anyone sweat as much as he was. His collar was crazy, his microphone, and then the keyboards blew up.
I have, I think, 5 or 7 layers of clothes, you know, and that heat was absolutely insane. But I was ready to go on.
but then the keyboards all blew up. And from the heat, everything overheated, and we had to actually take an unplanned interval in the dress rehearsal. So I was freaking out. Well, what if it's like this tomorrow night? What's going to happen during the filming? And, you know, the next day came and it was still hot in the morning. I remember I got up really early to go out and see how it was. And the most amazing thing happened. A front moved in and it rained.
Late afternoon.
Temperature, dropped maybe 20 degrees.
It was in the high 70s.
And it was the most beautiful evening. I
mean, beautiful.
It was magical. Like magic.
Yes, magical, yes.
And so we were, I mean, George, we were just all so relieved. The temperature.
Well, so was I. I was out front at the WFMT tent and the deluge came down. But I was worried for you guys because I've done that kind of thing too in a past life. And then it cooled off and I thought, okay, we're ready to go with this. Yeah. Well, that is all the time we have. Thanks to all our panelists for joining us this evening and for sharing each of your remarkable talents and helping bring this timeless work to life at Ravinia. A special thank you to PBS, the Women's Board of Ravinia Festival, and the Ravinia Artistic Initiative Fund for making it possible to capture and share this production with a national audience. It has truly been such a pleasure spending time with each of you, Marin, Paulo, Josephine, Joshua, Welz, as well as with our live audiences on Facebook tuning in from all over the country. Now, Jamie Bernstein via Facebook told me earlier today that Ballantine Scotch was her father's drink of choice. So let's together raise a glass to the genius of Lenny as we prepare to experience the Ravinia production of Leonard Bernstein's Mass on PBS Great Performances. Tune into your local PBS station, pbs.org/GPERF, or the PBS video app. And you can catch an encore performance this Sunday, May 17th at 1 p.m. Central. Please check your local listings. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
I'm WFMT's George Preston. Good night, and we hope you enjoy the production.